Welcome back to the Beyond the Bestseller podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Schuknecht, and today's guest is another Kelly,
Yay.
Kelly Lutman, author of Thriving Through Cancer, a holistic approach for your journey. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you. I am so delighted to be talking to you about my book, but to get to talk to another Kelly, that's always fun.
Yeah, I don't actually come across a lot of Kellys. I did when I was in I feel like in elementary school there was two or three in every grade, but
Mhm.
as an adult I don't really run into a lot of Kellys. So anyways, nice to run into another Kelly. So Kelly, tell me about your book and why you wrote it. What led you to write? This is not your first book, actually.
No, it's
You
not.
have more than one book, but tell me what led you to write the book Thriving Through Cancer.
Well, I am a functional medicine health coach. I help people reverse disease by using adjustments in their food, nutrition supply, lifestyle, things like that. And I have been part of networking groups for quite some time, talking about the process and the resilience of the body when you give it what it needs for building blocks. And I had a friend in one of my networking groups who had gone through surgery to a mastectomy because of breast cancer. And one spring I got an email from her saying, Kelly, I have a binder almost 2 inches thick with all the details of my treatment protocol. And all it says for nutrition is drink Ensure and Carnation Instant Breakfast. And that just made me wince because those are not nutrition. But she went on to say, I've known you long enough to know there's so much more, and I need you on my team. And so I coached her and helped her with details for how to support her body through the process. But in the meantime, it planted something in my heart. Nearly 2 million people are diagnosed with cancer every year. And most of them don't know me or someone like me who are talking about how to support your body. And what can I do about that? How can I spread the message? How can I get what I know out to them so that they can strengthen their body in the process? Because my book is not about the treatment. The medical team is totally focused on the treatment and eradicating the cancer. My book is about what do you do to support the 99% of you that doesn't have cancer? Because there's a whole rest of your body that's otherwise considered healthy, but it's getting exposed to the same treatment that the cancer cells are getting exposed to. And so unless you purposely supply the nutrients it needs, the nutrition to support it, give it the rest and movement your body needs, it's a really hard road for the whole body. And I have a personal theory that I think the less support your rest of your body gets during the treatment, the more likely your immune system is going to be so suppressed that a recurrence of cancer is far more possible. I don't want that for anybody. I don't want the first time for anybody. But if we can strengthen your body and help you support the rest, the whole body, mind, and spirit goes through this battle. And if you can support the whole person in that, then there's less need for fear of recurrence.
Yeah. So I've never had cancer.
Me either.
Knock on wood. Fortunately, however you're supposed to follow that up, but I have had surgeries before, and I remember. This is like what I'm equating it to as you're talking about it, like how. And in fact, my son just had surgery this week, and we've been talking about how taxing it is on your body. So, like for example, in his situation, he had knee surgery, which, affects, how you walk and affects everything. But you get through the initial period of like the pain, the immediate recovery of like, first couple of days. And now I feel a little better, but I don't feel like myself yet. And I remember that feeling of like, it took days, maybe even weeks to like start feeling just back to normal.
Right.
And so how, when you're dealing with cancer treatment, it's not a one and done. Like it's not in most cases, it's not just like one thing you do and then now you're on the road to recovery. So it's a constant, if you're going in for chemo or radiation or multiple surgeries or whatever, it's a constant thing, right? So how does that talk about, I mean, it seems like a very obvious like thing that you should be eating healthy, right? But like not everyone really knows that. Like, so why is it important to eat healthy during that period and like giving your body the nutrients that it needs? Like how does that help in that process?
Well, when you think about it, our food is the way our body is supposed to get the nutrients that become building blocks for the function of our body. But let's face it, what's in our grocery stores these days is a whole lot of edible food-like substances, but it's not recognized by the body as food. What is food is really what you'd find more on the perimeter of the grocery store, the perishable stuff. When it's been changed and modified in a factory to remove the parts that are perishable and put in chemicals and things to make it able to sit in a package on a shelf for months and not change. I tell my clients, if no self-respecting bacteria will eat it, it's not good for your body either. So we need to have the food that your body recognizes. The fruits and vegetables and animal meats and things like that, your body recognizes, and a whole lot of water. We drink a lot of liquids. We don't always drink a lot of water. And just because your liquid is water-based doesn't mean your body recognizes it for hydration. So that's very, very important. But yes, it's invasive. I interviewed many cancer patients in preparation for writing my book. And there are often ones that are doing a week of chemo and then they have 2 weeks off. And that week after the chemo, they're flattened. They're just trying to write it out. And then that second week after chemo, they have a good week. And it's like, okay, I got to do all the things I want to do this week because next week we start this cycle all over again. But when you are nourishing your body and giving it real food that it can process and utilize and making sure your digestion is working well so that it's pulling the nutrients, then you don't have that crash and then build back up again. You can stay, yes, you're still going to have some hard days, but it's not a crash. It's just, okay, we're lulling and now we're coming back up again, and then we'll lull and then we'll come up again. But it does equip your body to be able to tolerate so much more of the treatment itself. I had one client that I coached through her cancer treatment, and she was doing radiation. And we changed her diet. She lost 30 pounds without even trying. We just adapted her diet. And her doctor would ask, how are you doing through the treatment? She said, I'm not having the symptoms you say I'm supposed to have. And he thought she was in denial, but when I would check in with her, she'd say, no, Kelly, I really feel good. Yes, I'm tired after the treatment, but I'm not flattened and I'm not nauseous and I'm not all the things they say. And her doctor wanted to put her on antidepressants because he thought she was in denial of her symptoms. And she ended up changing doctors because he wouldn't honor the fact that she was supporting her body with good nutrition and it was making a difference in her treatment outcome. So she found a different doctor that supported her in that instead.
Why are doctors not recommending that kind of diet? I mean, some probably are, I'm sure, but it sounds like from the couple of examples that you shared, like eating or telling people to do Ensure or Carnation instant breakfast. Speaking of when I was in elementary school around my other Kellys in my classroom, I remember drinking that for breakfast. But
I'm glad you survived.
Yes. I don't think I did it a lot. I just have that memory of drinking that when I was young. But so that, and then this doctor, not being aware that what was going in her body was affecting how she was feeling. Why do doctors not know that and recommend a whole food type diet?
Well, it blows my mind that too, and you do find some doctors that recognize and
Sure.
acknowledge the importance, but the average doctor does not study nutrition in medical school. They have a few hours of class amongst dozens of hours of other classes, and they just don't recognize that. But it was interesting in my research for the book, I found the writings of a doctor who himself had had cancer, and then it returned. And the second time it returned, he purposed to change his diet and support his body more holistically. But he said in talking to other friends, why don't we look at food? Why don't we do more like this? And the friends' response was usually, if food was important, we would know about it, meaning we would have scientific studies that demonstrated its effect. Well, unfortunately, in all the development of pharmaceuticals, they have set the standard as double-blind, placebo-controlled studies that they do when they're developing medications. But it takes billions of dollars to do those studies, and there's no money for that level of study that won't produce a patented product to sell, and they can't patent natural food. So it's more because they're expecting studies. There are a lot of them. I have an endnote list of 49 studies that back up what I say in the book. I put that in there for the doctors in case they wanted to check it out. But there are small studies
Yeah.
that still show it makes a difference. And I've seen it in my clients. It makes a difference. We just don't have the vast, big studies that, the media and newspapers are going to promote.
Yeah, yeah, that's crazy. So your book is not necessarily about healing cancer or like
No.
recovering. How do you say that? Like getting rid of cancer through
Right.
the food, but about how to nourish your body through dealing with cancer and the treatment and all of
Right,
that.
right. There's so many different approaches you can take to eradicating cancer. I chose to take the position of whatever treatment you choose, this is important to support the rest of your body through that treatment. And frankly, because that's the approach of my book, 80% of the book is applicable to everybody because it's
Yeah,
supporting the body.
yeah,
So there are particular chapters in there aimed at cancer patients, how to tolerate chemo, how to help your body come through chemo more. Why eating sugar is not smart when when you have a diagnosis of cancer. Various ones like that are specific for cancer patients. But I have had so many friends that have purchased the book in support of me and said, wow, I learned stuff. I've got stuff that I can apply for my body and I don't have cancer. So I often have promoted it as buy the book, learn some things you can apply for your own journey in wellness, but then you have the book. Do you remember reading Rainbow with the LeVar Burton
oh yeah,
years back?
yeah,
Their book recommendations at the end of the show were so engaging. It just made you want to go buy that book because they were talking about their experience with the book. And it's the same way. If you have already read the book and learned some things for yourself, then when you have a friend that's diagnosed and you want to support them in some way, you can give them the book and say, hey, my friend read this book. I read this book and I learned this from it. I think there might be some stuff in here that would benefit you too. That's going to be so much better than, oh, you have cancer? Here, you need to read this.
right,
Because most
right.
of them don't want to read books.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you have to be somewhat willing to, not, maybe not will, but like you have to believe that whole food is good for your body.
Yes.
Like that's
Yeah.
just somewhat aware. Maybe it's aware is what I'm trying to say. Like, um, because to me, I've actually done a couple of times. I've done the diet, and I've had people on my podcast who recommend against diets, but I have done Whole30 before,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that was where, which yeah, I would imagine that you would like that,
Oh yeah,
that approach to
definitely.
eating. Maybe not 100% of the time, but like I really learned from doing that how good whole foods were for my body.
Mm-hmm.
Just when you eat that way for a period of time, there's a lot of, you just see a lot of results from that. And
Yes,
so that
yes.
to me, after doing Whole30 one time, I really cut sugar out of my diet, like almost 100%. Like I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's in lots of things, but like the extra sugars, and just habits that got cut from my diet, like drinking soda. Like I just
Yeah,
completely stopped drinking
yeah.
soda, stopped putting creamer with sugar into my coffee in the morning, and
Mm-hmm.
just those little changes that you notice that you can make those little adjustments, and then you realize you don't need those things. I don't need to
You
sit all the time. I
survived, and
always
your
have my water
taste
bottle
buds
sitting here, and
change.
yeah.
Yeah, your taste changes, and you begin to taste things in the whole food
Yep.
that you didn't realize you were missing before,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
there's so much chemical in our processed foods
Yeah.
that we don't realize how it's dictating, controlling our taste.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, if somebody has not tried Whole30 or eating whole foods regularly, uh, I do recommend it because I really noticed a difference there. You mentioned that you shouldn't eat sugar
Hmm.
or that it's, I think you said it was a bad idea to eat sugar when you're diagnosed
Right.
with cancer. Can you talk about that a little bit, and why? I don't, I think I kind of know of that, but like why, how does it affect you?
Well, a lot of people know this, the general sugar feeds cancer is,
Oh,
and I have actually had clients whose doctors said, no, that's not true. And I'm like, wait a minute. The PET scan that they do to test for cancer's presence, they feed you a glucose solution, which is a heavy, thick syrup, sweet, nasty stuff. And then they do a scan in your body to see what cells light up.
mm,
Cancer cells light up because they have more sugar receptors, because cancer as a cell, it is a damaged cell. It doesn't have the normal cell ability to switch between glucose and fat as an energy source. It only can handle glucose, and so it has a lot more glucose receptors on the cell. And if that's the way they test to see if cancer's in your body, how can you say cancer doesn't, or sugar doesn't feed cancer? It doesn't make sense.
right.
So I'm a believer in, you have two dogs in the fight. The one that wins is going to be the one you feed. So let's not feed the cancer selectively. Now, some people say, does that mean I can't eat fruit or anything? I control it. You don't want to be a fruitarian that eats nothing but fruit. If you're going to eat fruit, eat it whole with the fiber, not as juice. Because fruit juice is, you've taken all the fiber out and all you have is the fructose sugar. So it's basically a sugar water with some flavor. You don't want to do that because that goes very quickly into your system as sugar. But eat fruit whole so you have the fiber that slows down the sugar rush in your body. But focus on vegetables, focus on clean meats, wild caught fish, grass fed meats, not conventionally raised if at all possible, because that comes with antibiotics and growth hormones and all kinds of other things in the meat. But yeah, I explain a little bit more of the chemistry in it and the reasoning why the sugar is a priority for cancer cells. And therefore, if that's what they really want to grow, I don't want to supply it.
I was going to ask you about meat, and you maybe addressed that. But years and years ago, I read and watched. Oh, now I'm going to forget the name of it. Forks Over Knives,
Uh-huh.
which was very convincing that animal proteins are what. I mean, I'm not summarizing it well because it's been probably
Yeah.
15 years, but it was like basically like that's what causes cancer in your body, right? And I actually My husband and I watched it, and I think after we watched it, I think we went 3 years. We were completely vegan. We cut out all animal products from our diet. But then we realized how unhealthy we were eating over time because we started relying on a lot of processed foods that just didn't have animal products in them, and we weren't eating super healthy. We were just not eating meat, basically, and eggs, and and so then after a while we were like, we're not eating healthier because we're doing this, and so we did introduce meat back into our diet. Now I'm like, I can't imagine him going 2 days without eating meat now. I don't know how we did that for like 3 years, but the documentary or whatever it was, like the show that we watched was very convincing. So that's why I was curious about your feeling about meat. And you kind of talked about like the not
conventional.
Conventional.
I think that's the big kicker is you see, studies come out and say red meat is not good for you and this and that. And yes, those documentaries are very convincing in their positioning, but nutrition is an individually determined thing. I have clients that do very well as vegetarians or vegans, but in order to be vegetarian or vegan, you have to be very purposeful for getting proteins from other sources, from your beans, from different, and if you're including a lot of soy, I highly recommend organic, making sure that you're getting organic, because 95% of the soy crops in the U.S. are GMO, which means they're getting a huge dose of Roundup in their agricultural process of growing, and you're getting that as you eat it. That's also one of my concerns with a lot of vegetarians filling the gaps with bread products and things like that. And though wheat is not a GMO crop, the practice, the general tendency is 3 days before they harvest the crop, they douse the whole field with Roundup, which is glyphosate. And that kills back the grasses that's part of the wheat plant so that it's easier for them to harvest, but it doesn't come off the wheat kernels. So every time you eat traditionally grown wheat, whether it's whole wheat or ground flour based or whatever, you're getting a dose of Roundup, which damages the microbiome in your gut. And that
like
to
not
me
eat
is
anything.
that the fact that the FDA allows this, that the USDA allows this, we look at the FDA as controlling food and drug for our benefit. But do you know that the food and drug industry pays a large portion of their budget?
Right.
So how well do you supervise and control the guys that pay your paycheck?
Right.
There's a conflict of interest there. And
absolutely.
I think there's a lot of things that are allowed in the US that aren't allowed around the world.
I was just going to ask you
to
that
me.
if you know about that I had heard that I went to Portugal in May, and somebody had told me that we had just had some sort of conversation around the breads there, and how somebody was saying how the bread did not make them feel the way that they normally feel when they eat bread. And then somebody was saying how I think it's like what you just described is not legal in Europe. So the wheat there doesn't have that. And so the theory there was that, and I don't know how much these people actually knew about what they were talking about, but somebody had mentioned how in the U.S. there's so many people think they have celiac disease, or they want to be gluten free because they think they are reacting to the celiac, but it's actually like the chemicals that are in our wheat, or all, I don't know if it's a Roundup, but something that's being sprayed on the wheat that's affecting us. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this stuff is crazy.
I absolutely believe it. And I was in Europe just earlier this month. And frankly, at home, I avoid gluten. I avoid wheat products commercially because of that. But I really enjoyed it in Europe because I wasn't worried about it so much. But the challenge is they have hybridized our wheat so much to make it easier for agriculture, but also they've increased and what I want to say, expanded the gluten levels in our wheat kernels because that benefits the baking industry. And gluten makes things fluffy when it's baked. And so I think it's a combination of the Roundup damaging our guts and then having even more gluten than normal, that a lot more people, if they aren't identified celiac, and it usually takes years to get that diagnosis, even though you are suspecting it, but a lot of people, and I've worked with many clients that I have recommended, let's test gluten-free on your diet and see if you feel better without it. And joint aches and headaches and things like that go away when they're not eating conventionally raised gluten. Now, I usually don't recommend that, for a good period of time, they remove it completely, even organic. Remove it completely while we work on healing their gut from whatever damage has been caused. And then they can test, maybe occasionally, not on a regular basis. But so many people are constantly consuming it. And to be honest, it doesn't satisfy and hold you very long. If it's not whole grain, if it's not whole wheat, which a lot of things are advertised as whole wheat, Cheerios box says 24 grams of whole wheat grams, whatever. But when you look at the nutrition label, it's 1 gram of fiber per bowl of Cheerios. That tells me the whole wheat was at the beginning of the factory, but didn't arrive in the box. There's a difference there. And I always tell my clients, what's on the front of the box or the package is marketing. You need to look at the ingredient label. You need to look at the nutrient label to find out what's really in there. And even then, there are numerous things that the FDA, if it's not over this amount, you don't have to put it on the label. So there's a lot of things we don't know about that's in our food, which is sad. Yeah.
So your book is, so speaking of marketing, it's marketed towards people with cancer, who have been diagnosed with cancer. But really, what you're talking about is although it's tailored for that, like people will get something out of it even if they don't have cancer, they're not diagnosed with something right now. It's just learning about how these foods affect your body and how you can nourish your body better by eating whole foods.
Exactly. And it goes beyond that even. I started off writing just more in nourishment and the body, but then I realized body, mind, and spirit, the whole body goes through this treatment journey. And so there are chapters in there for those that, talk, because cancer, as soon as you're told you have cancer, it's an immediate attack of fear. And how are you going to manage that fear? Because fear in the brain shuts down the immune system for considerable time. And so always being afraid of what's going on and what's going to be the outcome is not beneficial to the healing journey. So I provide some guidance in the book for how to process that, how to not just deny it and shove it down. That's not going to be good because the body still knows it's there. But how do you process that and come through with, I believe in this, I'm standing on this, I have hope, and build that up so that that's part of your armor through this process.
Yeah. Well, this has been super fast, Kelly. I'm not a big nutritionist, so sometimes when I have people come on and talk about food or fitness, even like sometimes I'm like, I don't even know like what to ask, but gosh, I had a great time talking about this with you, and I will link to your book in the show notes. Thank you. But also, how else can listeners or viewers learn more about you and what you're doing and find you online?
The best way would be going to my website, which is pursuewellnessforyou.com, all spelled out in words. There they can not only find out about this book and my first book, they can learn more about my coaching process and even request a discovery call with me just to talk about whatever they're dealing with and how maybe I can help them I don't like to sign clients up without really talking to them to determine if we're a good fit together.
So just a little bit more along that line, is that, are your clients typically people who have been diagnosed with cancer, or is it anyone who is looking for advice around nutrition and just
both
healthy
directions?
eating?
I do work with cancer patients, but I also work with a lot of people, especially those that have chronic disease diagnoses and they're tired of a life sentence of it. Then I can help them reverse IBS, reverse type 2 diabetes. Doctors don't tell you it's possible, but it is. I've done it many times with clients. And so just because I use as a functional medicine coach, I look for the root cause. Instead of the medical approach is you have a symptom, we're going to squelch that symptom with a medication, rather than seeing what that symptom is, what message is the body giving you. And shutting down the symptom is kind of like cutting the brake line so that you don't get the message in the car, but it doesn't fix the brakes for you. So we still want to find what's the root cause, and that's what I do with my clients, is finding out the root cause so we can resolve it. When you can give the body what it's lacking, it does an amazing job of healing.
Great. Well, thank you. So we will include all of those links in the show notes.
Thank you.
Thank you for putting this book out there, and thank you for coming on and sharing that story with us.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Looking for a community of women writers to support and inspire you on your journey? Join the Author Power Circle. Connect weekly with fellow authors, stay accountable, and move your book forward in an encouraging community. Learn more at kellyschuknecht.com.